reality, fiction, everything. My name is Arun Venugopal. I am the host of the Micropolis live series, and I'm a reporter here at WNYC, report on issues of immigration. Thank you all for joining us here for this very special event. You know, when the producers of this play, the Courtroom, first told us that they were going to end with the shebang with this a real-life judge performing a naturalization ceremony, I was like really excited, but also a little quivery because I'm like, oh God, a naturalization ceremony. I don't want to come up here and be like a puddle of tears and all that. And I noticed that some of you didn't actually stand up, which is completely shameful. But to all of you who did participate, thank you. I hope you got a big kick out of that and took away a little something special. I should tell you a little about my own family and our naturalization history. My parents and my oldest sister, the three of us, siblings, and they arrived in the US on January 1st, 1970, from India after a short stint in Scotland. So that's when they arrived in Washington, D.C., where my other sister was born, and then they moved to Connecticut. New Britain is where I was born, New Britain, Connecticut. And then we went down to Houston, which is where I kind of grew up. And all three of them, which is, say, my dad, my mom, and my oldest sister, they became citizens over various points of the 1980s. And about an hour ago, I was like, wait a minute, where was I during all these naturalization ceremonies? So I texted them, right? And I was like, whatever happened to these naturalization ceremonies? Why didn't I go? And they're like, oh, yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I guess you had finals, right? And I was like 8 years old. I don't think I had finals. Like, why didn't you invite me? And my mom thought she was really clever. She's like, you missed lots of milestone events, Arun. And I'm like, that is the most ridiculous and completely like deflecting answer I've ever heard. And then it devolved into this group text conversation about real estate, and now we're here. So I have no answer to why I wasn't there, but I do think that the naturalization ceremony, naturalization, becoming American, means something today. There's something precious about it that we all realize as participants or as spectators. I think that we realize just how meaningful this is in a way that maybe we didn't, at least not in my family, 30-something years ago. And so that's why we're here, to talk about that and also to talk about art and what it means in this particular era. So I'm going to call up some of the members of the cast and the production, and we're going to talk about this. So why don't we invite up a few people. Guys, you out there, you want to come on up? Actors. Take your seats. Got a big old panel. All right, introductions. Elizabeth Keithley, played by Kristin Villanueva, right next to me. And you have, as you might know, might recognize her, playing the role of Judge Elizabeth Lamb, is Judge Elizabeth Lamb. Arian Moayed, who arranged the transcript for the Courtroom. He's the co-founder and board chair of Waterwell. Linda Powell, who played Richard Haynes, the defense lawyer. Professor Gemma Solimene, who is an associate professor at Fordham Law School and the director of the Immigrant Rights Clinic. And Kathleen Chalfant, the actor who played the federal judge. Thank you very much for joining us here. All of you. Kathy, what was your judge's name again?
Easterbrook.
Okay, Easterbrook. And first name?
I don't remember.
Some guy.
Some guy. He was a
Frank Easterbrook.
Frank Easterbrook. He was a terrifying person apparently in real life, and you can sort of tell from the transcript.
So I'm curious. Let's start with you, Arian. Why, of all the thousands of asylum cases you could have picked from, why this particular one, the story of Elizabeth Keithley?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of reasons why. One was, I think for cases that are, that have like, let's say for example, that happen on the border of a 6-year-old that has to like represent themselves, those cases, I find that the injustice there is so great that I don't think that I have anything else to say besides just, you know, seeing that. When this case came into when this transcript came to us, I fell very deeply in love with two things. One was Elizabeth Keithley, as an immigrant from Iran, and grew up with two parents whose English wasn't super great, and someone that I constantly, at a very young age, had to be the translator of the house. I completely, 100% understood every single situation that happened to Elizabeth Keithley just from the transcript, because that has happened to my family so many times that I can't even tell you. So that was the first, like, the interpersonal story of Elizabeth Keithley really spoke to me, and spoke to me how kind of precisely and pinpoint of how difficult it is at times to be an immigrant that is trying so hard to put one step in front of another. So that's the first part. And the second part was, you know, it's a very complicated world that we live in right now. But for my family, you know, America is a really great place that gave me the opportunity. And sometimes the reason why it's so great is because that the laws of the land are oftentimes don't work, but many times do. And that was something that I started falling in love with. Just the presence of the law, and how Richard Haynes kind of fought through a legal way of making that happen. That's why.
And Linda Powell, you playing Richard Haynes, in some ways, do you see yourself as performing, in a sense, the function of being the moral center of the play? Voicing these issues? You ask for the judges to consider context, and you say, let me see that quote of yours, you say, we entrust the government, some of this sounds a little naive at this point especially, but we entrust the government to do the right thing. And there's something both incredibly naive but also quite wonderfully idealistic about that, isn't there?
Well, I think the great thing about the way that this case ends up is that in the end it takes far longer than any of us feel it should have, but the right thing does happen in this case. And I think that Richard Haynes, I think in the context of this production, it's kind of the audience mirror, you know, this doesn't make sense, this doesn't make sense, this doesn't make sense, can we fix it? In reality, I think that the law comes through as the moral center in this way, because the law does work. It just has to go through its processes. You have to go through the first trial to get to the court that will let you do the thing you need to do in order for her to become a citizen and join the country. So in terms of Richard Haynes representing the law, yes.
Kristin Villanueva, you played the role of this person who has to go through these very painful and drawn-out deportation proceedings. I'm just curious, broadly speaking, can you tell me a little about how you kind of got into this role when you knew you were performing the role of someone who exists? She's still out there alive, and she went through this process just a few years ago.
A friend that I worked with in 2012 recommended me to our amazing director, Lee Sunday Evans, and that's how I got it, yeah.
Did you feel the need to get a sense of what the real life Elizabeth Keithley is like?
Yes. Well, Richard Haynes was very communicative with our director and our playwright, so we were able to ask the Keithleys some questions, but they didn't meet them until we were already up and running. But for me, I just had whatever the transcript was to go from, and just from my own experience. I'm an immigrant. I moved to the States in 2000, oh gosh, long time ago. 2009, 2011.
Oh, so long ago.
A while back, but I was naturalized in Brooklyn in 2012. So,
yeah.
From the Philippines, yeah.
Oh, wow. So, I mean, how'd you feel performing this role? I know there are people you know, you're getting teary doing this. Of course, you're a great actor. You know what, you're a professional, but do you mind letting us
Oh yes, it took me by surprise because when Lee described the text, my initial reaction was, oh, that's easy. Yeah, I can do Filipino accent. I can do that. Oh my goodness. When we started doing it, like it started with the accent first, which I thought that's going to be easy. But then as I read the script and realized where she's not from where I'm from. Then I had to think, oh, okay, I have to make it a heavier accent. I have to then things started coming up for me, because I went to a conservatory, so we tried to get rid of the accent. We tried to neutralize it. My teacher would say, so we can have a lot of options to adopt other accents. But in doing that, you want to assimilate so hard, like do your job as a good actor. You forget what that feels like. So then with this role, I have to put it on even thicker. And it just brought up a lot of things that I guess I didn't have to think about until now.
Kathleen Chalfant, tell us a little about, for you, like what does it mean to be part of this production?
Well, it's a great honor to be part of this production. It felt like what it always feels like doing jury duty. That you're always so surprised at how well people want to do the job and the importance of the law, the fact that it's a big deal, the law. And to play a famously difficult judge is fascinating because you follow the transcript, and when the judge decides to accept Richard Haynes's argument is not in the transcript. The judge takes a notion because the judge could have made the same decision as the original judge did, and it feels like that's what he's going to do. So it's fascinating to play a person who just takes a notion. And then as you can feel in the final decision, somebody who is proud of this decision that they made, which is out of character, actually. So it's been fascinating to be inside, and especially now in this time in which the law is under attack all the time. And as Linda said, it's so important to be reminded how important it is.
Yeah, and immigrants too. Yeah, both.
Yeah.
Yeah, under attack as well. Immigrants. I just don't think that a lot of people actually know too much about how difficult it is to get here, how difficult it is to jump into a culture and language that we don't know. I always say to other folks, like, imagine packing up all of your family and say, we're moving to somewhere in China, and we're going to learn the language, and we're going to learn this, and we're going to do that, and that's what we're doing. It's difficult. It's very, very difficult. And when you see it under attack, personally, as immigrants that have come up in this country, it hurts it hurts all of us, but it hurts in a different way for us. And so that's a real kind of amazing thing about this case, is that the resilience and the grit of the immigrant experience is kind of manifested in this case.
Professor Soleimani, you direct the Immigrant Rights Clinic.
Yes.
Is there any particular detail in this particular case that you think you would point out to a student as something that was pivotal or that really marks it as distinct from others?
The legal argument was really, quite frankly, it can be up there as brilliant. I say, and I say that because.
And just when you say the legal argument, what do you mean?
The legal argument about the estoppel, right? About how it is that in order to be deportable under the immigration laws, you have to have violated a law. But could you really have violated the law? Did you have a defense should you have been charged with it, right? Because remember, this was a situation where she didn't need to have been charged with the violation of the federal law, because the deportability or the inadmissibility, it really is the thing in the immigration laws that essentially would take her out of being able to get status, says very plainly, if you voted in any election, you were inadmissible. You were not allowed to be granted a visa, be given a visa. And there were there's an exception, and which she did not meet at all. And so just the strict structures of the immigration law, there was really no wiggle room, right, in order to make a different decision. And if it had not been, but for this argument, right, we would not be telling this story. We wouldn't be here, right? There would be nothing to reenact, or maybe there would be something to reenact that wouldn't have the happy ending that it did. So I think the power of the law, but also the creativity that is needed, and by that I don't certainly mean that you don't make up the law, right? But the creativity that is needed, and what you have with your legal training, what you can provide to clients with making legal arguments, right, and trying to find your way out of a problem, right? It's like, my client has this problem. What am I going to do? Because if I look at the INA, which is the immigration statute, if I look at it, there's nothing I can do. But that can't be, right? So what else might I be able to do?
Judge Lamb, I'm curious, you performed this naturalization ceremony. Is that something you've done many times over the years?
I've only done it about 3 or 4 times, because time is the enemy of an immigration judge. And it is the thing that judges like to do the most, because it's happy, and we have to deport people many times, and we have a lot of tears and a lot of strife in the courtrooms. But lately, they've been telling us that it takes too much time away from the bench to do a nat ceremony. So little by little, they took that.
And it's just too feel good, damn it.
Well, they said it was time. So no, I've only done it because they rotate. You know, you rotate through, because that's something judges want to do.
Wow. Does it feel any different than it might have the first time you did it? Like in terms of the room, does it feel always, feel good, or does it feel even more momentous, do you think, now than it used to?
It always feels very good, actually. Sometimes it can be 200-300 people in a room, and usually they give them all these little American flags, and the people are so excited. And I used to think it doesn't care what I say, because they're so excited that this happened to them, so you get up and you try to spread as much goodwill for our country. That part gets more difficult.
So I have a question that's sort of a bigger or broader question, but this is theater. This is a form of art, but it feels different to me, and I could be wrong. I haven't, seen that many plays, but I want to ask you kind of a basic question, a big question about the function of art in the era of America First. Arian, I want to start with you since you sort of initiated this, but what is the function of art now? I mean, against this backdrop of a very diverse society, is it the same as it's always been, or do you think there's something new and more urgent about this?
Amazing question. The reality is that when we're in high school, some of the plays that we read are Romeo and Juliet, and they are Death of a Salesman, and we read some Greek plays. And there's a reason why. It's because those plays represent us in a very deep and empathetic way, and how to use those plays to kind of better society through that. That's why we read those plays. It's not, there's a lot of plays to read. These are the ones that we read. And so our goal, with Waterwell, and our goal with this play is to kind of be responsive to the world around us, that is kind of like flipped upside down, where, all these things are kind of like, fraying. And so in a way, this is a response to that. This is a response to the world that we live in right now. And so in a way, I think that art should be responsible. I think it should be responsive. I also think that, what's cool about this piece is that it has a deep interpersonal connection to some very complicated human beings. As someone that sat with this play for a while now, or is it not even play, this text for a while now, I genuinely have deep empathy for every single one of these characters. And that's because people are complicated, and in this world of like, you're over here and you're over there and you go over this way, and it's nice to kind of like be complicated and live with it, you know?
Kathleen Chalfant, we have just like a minute left. Do you have any thoughts on that particular question?
Well, I think that art does what Shakespeare, I'm going to cry now, what Shakespeare said, which is to hold a mirror up to life. It's our business to tell a story that is the truth. And the work of art, only exists here between us and the audience. And it's this thing, this community, that we are what we must make. All of us together in this room, all of us together, I think, to be reminded that we live together. That in this case, nobody's from here. Nobody's from here.
If I might add, I think that to follow up, that our art also plays a role in educating. Right, there are issues that, but for art, right, but for seeing it on a screen, seeing it on stage, you don't even know exists, and so it does lend itself to being empathetic and understanding that there are issues out there that you might want to and need to pay attention to because they do affect people's lives.
And maybe take us into rooms and spaces that we may not otherwise ever travel into, like
Absolutely.
an immigration court. Thank you all so much, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
And good night.